Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. In the small town of Maplewood, nestled amongst rolling hills and dense forests, secrets lingered like the morning fog that clung to the streets each dawn. The quaint houses, with their neatly trimmed lawns and welcoming porches, hid a darkness that would only emerge in the dead of night. It was a place where everyone knew each other's names, but few knew their truths. On an unremarkable Tuesday evening, the tranquility of Maplewood shattered as sirens pierced through the calm. This was a sound that did not belong in the town's idyllic landscape, marking the beginning of an investigation that would unravel the fabric of the community. A local teenager, 17-year-old Lila Carter, was reported missing after failing to return home from a routine trip to the library. Her mother, Sarah Carter, had sensed something was wrong the moment the clock struck 7. Lila was punctual, often to a fault. Panic struck her veins as she dialed 911. Her voice trembling as she relayed the details to the operator. "She's never late," Sarah insisted, her anxiety palpable. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows on Main Street, the police quickly mobilized. Officers arrived at the Carter home, their faces set in grim determination. They began their search, combing the darkening streets of Maplewood, questioning the townsfolk with a calm that belied the growing hysteria. Whispers began to ripple through the community. Lila's disappearance felt unreal, a narrative out of a storybook, but the darkness was gradually seeping into their reality. Little did they know, this would be a case that would fracture hearts and friendships, turning familiar faces into strangers and neighbors into suspects. A web of secrets awaited, and Lila's fate rested heavily in the balance. The victim, Lila Carter, was a bright spark in Maplewood, known for her infectious laughter and an unwavering optimism that lit up any room. She was the kind of girl who volunteered at the local animal shelter and organized bake sales to raise funds for the community center. At 17, her world revolved around her friends, school, and dreams of becoming a veterinarian. To her, the future was a canvas waiting to be painted with possibilities and promise. Yet beneath the cheerful exterior lay a tangle of insecurities and pressure. Reality she battled in silence. Friends would remark on how Lila was the glue that held their group together, but the weight of expectations began to wear her down. Competitive grades, college applications, even a part-time job at the local diner contributed to a fragile facade. It was during a particularly taxing week that Lila found escape in the sanctuary of the Maplewood Library, where countless stories met her yearning for silence. On the night Lila vanished, she had been studying, absorbed in her biology notes. Her last moments, spent between the dusty shelves, seemed mundane, yet they carried an edge of distress, unbeknownst to those who knew her best. Now, as the news of her disappearance swept through the town like wildfire, each friend and family member reflected on her final days, straining to uncover any hint of trouble. Her best friend Emily recalled a conversation they had just days prior. I could sense she was different, a little distant. She brushed it off as stress, but I saw it in her eye. Residents gathered in hushed groups, forming makeshift vigil committees and writing Lila's name on posters plastered across town. Each person felt an overwhelming responsibility to bring their girl home, fueled by a combination of desperation and denial. Lila was more than a victim now. She was a piece of Maplewood's heart, and they were determined to find the missing glimmer of light before it slipped beyond reach. The crime scene. As dawn broke over Maplewood, the golden rays of sunlight painted the town in a false sense of tranquility. But the beauty of the morning belied the grim reality unfolding at the town's edge, where police had cordoned off an area by the secluded Whispering Pines, a wooded stretch just outside town. This location, known for a hiking trail that wound through the trees, had become the focal point of the investigation, a place still reeking of uncertainty and anxiety. Detective Mark Holt arrived at the scene, his expression a mixture of resolve and foreboding. Members of the K9 unit had already begun sifting through the underbrush, their dogs trained to track human scent. Officers combed the area with flashlights, scouring the ground for any signs of Lila amidst the fallen leaves and tangled roots. The atmosphere was heavy with unspoken fears. In small towns, everyone wanted to believe that terrible things could never happen. Yet here they were, on the precipice of something shocking. The first clue emerged around 10 in the morning. A blue sneaker, partially buried in the dirt, muddied but distinctly recognizable. As Detective Holt crouched low to examine it, a chill of dread crept up his spine. Could this belong to Lila? He quickly signaled for forensic specialists, who collected the sneaker as precious evidence. Around the scene, whispers began to circulate among the gathered onlookers. Some speculated whether Lila had been kidnapped or perhaps had wandered off and gotten lost. Old men in worn-out hats reminisced about times long past, while young mothers clutched their children, as if to shield them from the growing specter of fear that loomed over Maple. Within hours, the coroner's van arrived, and the air thickened with apprehension. A collective breath was held. The search for Lila had abruptly morphed from a standard missing person case into something darker, shrouded in unknown and unrelenting sorrow. Every face etched with worry mirrored the dread growing inside Holt. Lila's laughter echoed in his mind, a haunting reminder of what was at stake. Time was fading, and with it, the hope of bringing her home alive. The early investigation. With the day unfolding into a cloud of uncertainty, the investigation into Lila Carter's disappearance accelerated. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, a sense of urgency hung in the air, stirring a mix of fear and determination among law enforcement. Detective Mark Holt convened a team in the town hall, the scent of stale coffee mingling with palpable tension. They needed leads, and they needed them fast. "Let's start with her last known whereabouts," Holt stated, tapping a map laid out on the table. A red dot marked the library, where Lila had been last seen. He reviewed the days leading up to her disappearance, seeking any discrepancies or unusual behavior from the girl who had seemingly vanished without a trace. The detective instructed officers to interview every person who had been in the library that evening, reaching out to Lila's friends and classmates to piece together her last moment. Emily, still shaken, recounted their last texts, emphasizing Lila's unresolved stress. She was worried about her grades and the pressures from college applications. But she never mentioned anything serious, no threats, no strange encounters. As interviews progressed, a couple of students mentioned seeing a man loitering outside the library that night, a figure who seemed out of place in their quiet town. Descriptions varied, but the idea of someone unknown hanging around, especially in the context of Lila's disappearance, sent chills through the small group. While information gathered was sparse at first, patterns began to emerge. Investigators noted a string of petty crimes, vandalism, and theft reported over the last few months, with one local bar claiming an overdue patron had left an unsettling message about seeking lost souls. At 9, Detective Holt found the timing too coincidental and decided to pursue this lead further. By day's end, he felt the weight of uncertainty settling heavily on his shoulders. Lila's absence was a gaping wound in the town of Maplewood, and each unanswered question deepened the ache. This wasn't just a missing person case anymore. It was a race against time, and the shadows that loomed were growing darker by the hour. With each step taken, the truth felt closer, yet more elusive, making every heartbeat echo with urgency. The dead ends. As the investigation wore on, Detective Mark Holt found himself grappling with an unsettling reality. Every lead seemed to fizzle just as hope ignited. The early momentum of interviews lost steam, turning into an onslaught of what-ifs and empty promises. Officers combed the town relentlessly, but solid information remained elusive, leaving the team navigated through an increasingly tangled web of dead ends. A suspicious man identified near the library had vanished into thin air after a brief interview. Initially cooperative, the man's shifting demeanor raised red flags, but a thorough background check revealed nothing noteworthy. No criminal record, no ties to Maplewood, just another ghost in their search for Lila. As officers scoured security footage from traffic cameras near the library, they caught glimpses of the man but still lacked any substantial leads. Emily, desperate to contribute, began asking classmates about Lila in the hope of uncovering forgotten treasures of insight. Did she mention anyone new? Any odd behavior? But answers yielded little solace, and her heart sank with each rejection of personal knowledge. Frustration reached its peak when a report came in regarding a sighting of a girl matching Lila's description at a far-off gas station. Officers raced to the location, only to discover it had been a misidentification. Girl was local, but entirely unrelated to the case. The community's hope was crushed again, leaving an aftertaste of despair. As days turned into long nights, the team faced the pressure of a growing public outcry. Townspeople who once gathered in solidarity began to voice skepticism, the weight of uncertainty morphing into impatience. "If you can't find her, what are we paying you for?" one frustrated resident shouted at a local press conference. With each passing hour, the threads that had began to weave together are now fraying. Detective Holt felt the weight of every unanswered question, like chains tightening around his heart. The shadows that had drifted through Maplewood were now a suffocating shroud, and the hope for Lila's safe return dimmed with the fading light of each day. Time was no longer their ally. It was a merciless enemy counting down the moments until darkness enveloped them all. A break in the case. In the bleak silence following days of stagnation, the investigation into Lila Carter's disappearance finally caught a flicker of renewed energy. It was early morning when Detective Mark Holt received a call that had the potential to change everything. A local resident had discovered something suspicious tucked away at Whispering Pines, the same forest where Lila's blue sneaker had been found. Holt's instincts surged with hope, intertwined with apprehension. He darted to the scene. Arriving at the site, a small crowd had formed around a cluster of trees, their faces a mix of curiosity and anxiety. The resident, an elderly man named Mr. Jenkins, stood at the center, agitated and wide-eyed. "I was out here fishing yesterday morning when I stumbled across these," he said, his hands shaking as he revealed a couple of items he had hastily gathered: a silver locket and a torn piece of a floral patterned dress. Instantly, Holt sensed the significance of the evidence. The locket bore delicate engravings, and as the detective examined it closely, his heart raced. Just then, a photograph fell out, the image of a girl, unmistakably Lila, smiling back at him how she always did, radiating warmth and life he had longed to see. With urgency, Holt instructed forensics to collect the items for analysis, feeling a glimmer of hope flash through the heavy fog of despair. The locket could tie Lila to this location and potentially reveal the person or people responsible for her disappearance. As he directed the scene's control operations, he couldn't help but notice the simultaneous bloom of determination among the detectives. Dark clouds of grief began to part, if only momentarily. Back at the station, detectives hustled to contact Lila's family about the breakthrough. Emily's eyes widened with a mixture of hope and dread as she heard the news. "This could lead us to her," she exclaimed, scarcely daring to believe. The sense of urgency clung heavily in the air once again, as the team coordinated with local media to release information about the recovered items. They knew they'd need the community's eyes and ears more than ever. Somewhere in the depths of Maplewood, a thread had been pulled loose, and as the day stretched into twilight, Holt sensed they were on the cusp of unfolding a story that ran deeper than they had ever imagined. The fear that had held the town captive was beginning to fade, replaced by the embers of hope that Lila's disappearance might finally meet its resolution. The suspect. The unexpected recovery of Lila's locket sent shockwaves through the Maplewood investigation, transforming the sense of desolation into a renewed determination to find answers. Detective Mark Holt felt a relentless surge of energy coursing through him as he delved deeper into the artifacts unearthed at Whispering Pine. Each piece unearthed began to sketch the contours of a story long hidden under layers of silence. Forensic analysis of the locket revealed traces of DNA that yielded a partial match, sending the department into a frenzy of excitement and tension. After painstaking cross-referencing, a name emerged: a man known to the local community, a transient who had recently been spotted loitering outside the library and other public spaces. His name was Ethan Garrison, a drifter with a past riddled with misdemeanors, from petty theft to public disturbances. Holt intercepted the news with wariness while a suspect came into focus. The extent of Garrison's involvement remained shrouded in murky uncertainty. "We need to bring him in," Holt declared firmly at a briefing with his team. "But we have to handle this carefully. We can't afford another wild goose chase." The police apprehended Garrison at a rundown motel on the outskirts of town, where he was known to seek refuge. He was disheveled and jittery, his eyes darting with suspicion as the officers entered his room. "What's this about?" he demanded, but his bravado fell flat under the weight of their questioning. Holt asked directly about Lila. Garrison's demeanor shifted, panic flickering in his gaze, igniting doubt. "I don't know anything about no girl. I don't know anything about no girl," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. But inconsistencies began to bleed through his answers as officers pressed him on the timeline of his whereabouts. Back at the station, detectives sifted through Garrison's scattered belongings and uncovered several disturbing items, including newspaper clippings about Lila's case and a notebook filled with sketches eerily resembling the library's floor plan. The dots were connecting, yet the larger picture remained obscured. As the hours ticked by, his earlier flares of defiance extinguished as fear overtook him. The tension coiled thick in the air, tangible and suffocating. Holt knew they were close to unlocking the keys to Lila's fate, but he had to navigate this confrontation delicately. The stakes had risen, and with each moment that passed, so did the urgency to pull the truth from the clenched jaws of a reluctant suspect. The trial. After months of investigation, countless hours spent gathering evidence, and an emotional roller coaster of public interest, the day had finally arrived. The courtroom was filled to capacity, the atmosphere thick with anticipation as journalists jostled for the best view and community members whispered amongst themselves. They were not just witnesses to a trial. They were active participants in the quest for justice for Lila Carter. Ethan Garrison sat across the room, his once disheveled appearance sharpened with a crisp suit that stood in stark contrast to the turmoil within. His once fiery demeanor had been replaced by a somber stillness, as though the weight of his upcoming fate pressed heavily upon his chest. The defense claimed innocence, painting Garrison as a misunderstood drifter, a scapegoat thrust into a tragic narrative. The prosecution's case unfolded like a tightly woven tapestry, revealing the depth of evidence collected over the previous month. Detective Mark Holt took the stand, recounting the pivotal moments that led to Garrison's arrest. With a collected voice, he outlined the timeline from Lila's disappearance to the damning evidence discovered at Whispering Pines, highlighting the locket and the DNA matching Garrison. Witnesses took the stand. Emily's heart raced as she recalled her last interactions with Lila, her voice steady but strained. She was scared, and I didn't realize just how much until it was too late. Murmurs rippled through the audience as Lila's absence became an increasingly palpable entity in the room. The defense attempted to dismantle the prosecution's claims, sowing seeds of doubt about the legitimacy of the evidence. Criminal defense attorneys thrived on uncertainty. There are many drifters in this town. Should they all be persecuted based on mere circumstances? They argued, seeking to evoke sympathy for Garrison rather than fear. As the trial progressed, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. The pain of Lila's absence hung in the balance, mixing with the adrenaline of seeking justice. The community was haunted by memories of a girl who had brought warmth and joy to their lives. As the closing arguments echoed through the chamber, Holt's heart raced. In that moment, he seized the opportunity, stepping up to emphasize the importance of not just solving a case, but bringing closure to a grieving community. His voice rang out with conviction. We stand not just for Lila, but for every soul who deserves justice. Hours later, the jury filed in, and everyone waited breathlessly. The decision loomed large over the room, a collective breath held against the heavy reality of what justice could or could not bring. The verdict would echo not just through the walls of that courtroom, but long into the lives of those who had watched Lila's story unfold, leaving an indelible mark etched into the heart of Maplewood. The aftermath? In the wake of the trial, the air in Maplewood was thick with unresolved tension. Ethan Garrison was found guilty, a hard-fought victory that brought tears of relief and anguish to the eyes of many. But the celebrations felt muted and incomplete. With the verdict at hand, Detective Mark Holt walked into the town square and felt the weight of grief and renewal wash over him. To some, justice had been served, he thought. But for Lila's family, the finality of the decision did little to ease the gaping wound of their loss. Lila Carter, Lila's mother, remained a pillar of strength. Yet the sorrow in her gaze betrayed the crushing despair that lurked beneath. Thank you for finding the truth, she had said to Holt post-verdict, though the words could not encapsulate the depth of her heartache. In the weeks that followed, The vibrant spirit of Lila lingered in the air of the town on corners where children played, in local cafes where laughter once flourished, and within the heartfelt murals painted in her honor. Community members carried Lila's memory like a banner, refusing to let the tragedy extinguish her light. They organized vigils, installed a memorial bench at the library, and initiated youth programs in her name, hoping to instill the same kindness and community spirit she had shared. But behind the public facade lay an undercurrent of unease. Garrison's sentencing stirred whispers of doubt. What if he wasn't alone? What if there were others who had turned a blind eye, harboring a darkness that had inadvertently contributed to the tragedy? Detectives in Maplewood noted a shift in the community, a hesitant discomfort where trust had once flourished. Holt, too, found himself grappling with lingering questions that refused to dissipate. As he pulled the case files apart once more in the stillness of the night, he couldn't shake the feeling that there were echoes of Lila's disappearance left unresolved. The long lines between innocence and guilt began to blur in a town once characterized by clarity. Eventually, Lila's legacy evolved into a rallying cry for young people in Maplewood to embrace their voices, urging them to advocate for safety and awareness. Schools incorporated programs about self-defense and safe practices, while friendships strengthened in communities, eager to ensure that no child would experience what Lila had. In the quieter moments, Holt reflected on the impact of a single soul, how ripples of loss could transform a whole community into something resilient yet wary. He hoped that, while Lila's tragic story had taken root in the past, it would serve as a catalyst for a brighter future, ensuring that she would never be forgotten, a light held against the darkness, illuminating the path forward for generations to come. Reflection. As the seasons changed in Maplewood, the passage of time began to ease the raw edges of grief that had consumed the community. Detective Mark Holt often found himself wandering through quiet places beneath the sprawling oak where children played, and the deep woods where secrets intertwined with whispers of the past. Each visit prompted a different reflection, a reminder of how tragedy could reshape the very fabric of daily life. In the months following the trial, Holt had taken to visiting Lila's memorial bench at the library regularly, where the whispers of her name mingled with the rustling leaves. It became his sanctuary, a place where he could grapple with the shadows of his profession, where answers had come at a heavy cost. He remembered her laughter, a melody that resounded through the hallways, and felt a profound responsibility to protect that memory. Yet, alongside this reflection came the restless questions that had not been fully addressed. Each unsolved lead haunted him like ghosts refusing to be laid to rest. He recognized that justice, while important, did not always equate to closure. Lila's case had shaken the foundations of what had been a peaceful town, and for many, it remained a haunting reminder of vulnerability. For Emily and Lila's friends, their communal bonds deepened. They carried forth a mission not only to honor her memory, but also to reiterate the importance of vigilance, aiming to educate and empower their peers. They understood that prevention could shield others from the horrors they had witnessed. These moments of contemplation, Holt realized that Maplewood would never be the same. In the unfolding saga of loss and healing, a new chapter began, only rooted in connection, resilience, and the enduring legacy of a beloved girl who became a symbol of hope in the face of despair. The tragedy had ignited a fire within them all, a pledge to safeguard their future, ensuring that Lila Carter's spirit would forever remain a guiding light.